It was the evening of Sunday, October 1st, 2017, and photojournalist David Becker was enjoying the atmosphere as he took photos of the Route 91 Harvest Festival. Having covered everything from sport to political events and everything in between, David spent hours capturing the happiness of the crowd as they watched their favorite musicians belting out country songs, joining in, dancing, and reveling in the sense of community that a music festival invariably brings. Singer-songwriter Jason Aldean had taken to the stage and was giving the closing performance with his song When She Says Baby, when at 10:05 p.m. the music was punctuated with a series of rapid sounds. David Becker, who had just returned to the media tent, stepped outside to see where the noise was coming from. A security guard told him it was just firecrackers, so he returned to his photos. When the popping sounds came again, David was told that it was either faulty speakers or sound equipment. Again, he went back to the task in hand. When the sounds came for a third time, though, it became apparent that this was something more sinister. Speaking to the Washington Post, David later recalled, "I went outside and saw a lot of people panicking and running for the exit that was right by the media tent. I grabbed my camera and went back outside and found a place where I could see what was happening and also where I wouldn't be in the way of people. So I stood on a table and started to shoot, thinking to myself still that this isn't really happening. It's just the speakers popping. It was so dark I couldn't really see what was happening. There were a lot of people crying, speaking on cell phones and ducking for cover. As the crowd thinned out, I was able to go a little closer to try to see what was going on and take some more pictures, and I'm still thinking to myself, it's just the speakers, there is nothing going on." What David Becker was witnessing, though, was a catastrophic tragedy unfolding. A lone gunman had opened fire from the 32nd floor of the nearby Mandalay Bay Hotel, and in just one 10-minute shooting spree, had killed 58 people and injured hundreds more. It was, and still is, the deadliest mass shooting in modern U.S. history. On April 9, 1953, Stephen Craig Paddock was born to Dolores Irene Hudson and Benjamin Hoskins Paddock in Clinton, Iowa. Not long after his birth, the family moved to Tucson, Arizona, where they settled before welcoming Patrick, who was born in 1957, Bruce 1959, and Eric 1960. Absent father. The head of the household, Benjamin, was born in Wisconsin in 1926 and served in the United States Navy during the Second World War, before settling in Tucson to raise his family in the 1950s. Despite his job as a salesman, first of used cars and later of garbage disposal units, Benjamin was a career criminal who, in 1946, was convicted of auto larceny and fraud and sent to Illinois State Penitentiary, where he served his sentence until his release in 1951. Life on the outside apparently didn't suit Benjamin, however, and in 1953, the year his first child, Stephen, was born, Benjamin was convicted of check fraud and sent to Illinois State Penitentiary, where he stayed until August of 1956. He was also found to be in possession of a concealed revolver during one of his early arrests. Life in the Paddock household was tumultuous. Benjamin couldn't maintain a life free from crime, and once again stood accused, this time of 3 bank robberies at various branches of the Valley National Bank of Arizona in Phoenix, for a total of around $25,000, which would equate to around $270,000 today. During his arrest, he tried to mow down an FBI agent. Tried and convicted of the third robbery in 1961, Benjamin Paddock was sentenced to 20 years and was sent to the Federal Correctional Institution La Tuna in Anthony, Texas. However, on December 30th, 1968, he escaped and he was placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list for 8 years. Diagnosed as psychopathic according to the FBI, Benjamin Paddock was also thought to have possible suicidal tendencies. Incredibly, Benjamin managed to build a new life and a new identity for himself while on the run, and found work as a trucker, even working in drug abuse rehabilitation, before opening a bingo parlor for which he had to apply and was granted a license. In 1978, he was recaptured and returned to prison. In 1987, Benjamin was charged with racketeering and fraud, but managed to avoid serving a further sentence by paying a hefty fine of $100,000, or around $280,000 today. He died in 1998. Single motherhood. The four Paddock boys never really knew their father, although some reports state that he used to regularly beat young Stephen, and when he was arrested for robbing banks, their mother, Dolores, kept the truth from her boys, telling them instead that their father had died in a car crash. However, not everyone kept Dolores's secret. In 1960, when Stephen was around the age of 7, a neighbor took him swimming. She had heard about Benjamin's imminent arrest and wanted to spare his oldest son the trauma of seeing his father arrested, so she told him the truth about the bank robberies and his father's role in them. According to relatives, that was the day that Stephen Paddock's problems began. Determined to get on with her life, Dolores moved herself and her sons to Sun Valley, Los Angeles, where she worked hard as a secretary to keep a roof over her family's heads. Despite the shocking events in which their father was involved, the boys appeared to escape their father's influence, at least according to Stephen's brother, Eric, although what transpired decades later would question the validity of the youngest Paddock son's claims in the full glare of the world's media spotlight. Having settled in Sun Valley, Stephen graduated from John H. Francis Polytechnic High School in 1971 and earned a degree in business administration from California State University in 1977, the same year he married for the first time. That first marriage to Sharon Brunola lasted around 2 years, but in 1985 Stephen married again. This second marriage, to Peggy Paddock, ended in 1990. Neither marriage produced any children, and although the marriages failed, Stephen allegedly remained on good terms with both his ex-wives. While it's claimed that his father's criminal activities had no effect on Stephen's life, the family's poverty certainly did. His mother Dolores worked hard, but as a single mom, there was never enough money for life's luxuries. Stephen was determined to live a more financially secure life, and, according to one of his 2 ex-wives, he prioritized being self-reliant and self-sustaining, something he definitely achieved. Described as a math genius by a former classmate, Stephen worked his way to financial stability, working first for the IRS, before finding employment as an auditor for several high-profile companies, including the Defense Contract Audit Agency. Stephen could never be accused of being work-shy and went into real estate with his brother Eric, a business which he later sold off for a reported $2 million. Having moved to the greater Los Angeles area, Stephen bought and sold multiple properties, giving him a very comfortable lifestyle, one that had been denied him as a young child. Living the high life. Stephen's wealth brought with it an expensive hobby, gambling, and he would regularly frequent the high-limit rooms in various casinos, spending tens of thousands of dollars at a time. Although he fell short of the high rollers who were well known by the casinos and each other. No stranger to the luxuries of life, Stephen held a private pilot's license and enjoyed taking things easy on luxury cruise liners, sometimes alone, and sometimes accompanied by his long-term girlfriend, Marilou Danley. The pair had met when Marilou was working as a casino hostess in Reno. Often gambling together, the pair shared a home for more than 4 years, before things would come to a dramatic end. However, life wasn't all hearts and roses within the Paddock-Danley relationship, and Stephen was often seen being verbally abusive to his Philippine-born partner. According to Esperanza Mendoza, the supervisor of a Las Vegas Starbucks that the pair frequented, the arguments almost always happened when Marilou would ask Stephen for his casino card to pay for a purchase. Topped up by winning credits on automatic gambling machines, these cards could be used to pay for various goods along the Las Vegas Strip. He would glare down at her and say, with a mean attitude, "You don't need my casino card for this. I'm paying for your drink, just like I'm paying for you." Then she would softly say, "Okay," and step back behind him. He was so rude to her in front of us. However, Stephen's brother Eric saw a different side to the relationship. They were adorable. Big man, tiny woman. He loved her. He doted on her, Eric said. The beginning of the end. In the years preceding the Las Vegas shooting, Stephen Paddock's life began to spiral. Described as standoffish and disconnected, Stephen found it hard to maintain relationships. Former neighbors claimed that he never interacted with others, and was even said to have tried to erect a high fence around his home, something that puzzled other residents in the quiet community. In 2015, Stephen persuaded Marilou to give up work, despite her being opposed to the idea on financial grounds. Stephen took away that argument by offering her a monthly allowance. While the relationship had been romantic and physical in the beginning, Marilou claimed that the physical side of their relationship had petered out, with Stephen saying that he was unable to commit to more affection. While Stephen was able to have sex, the physical exertion became too much for him, and he would often sleep for hours after any kind of activity. According to police reports, Marilou described Stephen as a mild-mannered man who was never violent and who contained his rare anger well, without shouting or screaming. She also claimed that he rarely drank alcohol and never used illicit drugs. Later, however, she noticed the smell of alcohol on his breath with increasing frequency. While Marilou only saw, or at least described, his good side, his brother Eric saw a different version, noting that his big brother was the king of microaggression, going on to say that he was also narcissistic. Increasingly, Stephen's health seemed to be in decline. He often complained to Marilou that he was sick and that doctors couldn't cure him, telling him he had a chemical imbalance. In hotels, Stephen would ask to move rooms as he couldn't stand the smell, and said that chemicals gave him a headache. His avoidances even included wearing cotton gloves and refusing to shake hands with anyone. It wasn't just Stephen's health that declined, though. From around September 2015, his wealth began to dwindle too, which led to bouts of depression. Firearms. While Stephen's health and wealth took a downturn, his interest in guns increased exponentially. According to records, between 1982 and September 2016, he had purchased 29 firearms, including both handguns and shotguns. But in the space of just 1 year, October 2016 to September 2017, he amassed a further 55-plus firearms, mainly rifles, along with other gun-related paraphernalia. Marilou noticed the increase in weapons, but believed Stephen when he told her it was just a hobby. In fact, she even helped him load magazines and accompanied him to an unofficial shooting range near their home, where she set up targets for him to shoot. In August 2017, Marilou asked Stephen why he had so much ammunition. He had enlisted her help in packing duffel bags with loaded magazines, and each bag held 25 loaded magazines. He told her that guns use a lot of ammunition, and it was more cost-effective to buy it in bulk. The countdown begins. At the beginning of September, the couple were staying at the Mandalay Bay Hotel. Marilou noticed that Stephen was acting suspiciously and not himself at all, spending a lot of time staring out of the window at the Las Vegas Village venue and walking from one window to another as if checking angles. However, the stay passed without notable incident, and life went on. At the end of August or the beginning of September 2017, Stephen told Marilou that she should take a trip home to the Philippines to visit with her family. He made the travel arrangements himself, and on September 15th, she departed, leaving Stephen behind in the US. While she was away, Stephen made 3 separate wire transfers to her account. Some sources claim it was for a total of $100,000, while police reports state that it was closer to $150,000. Either way, he told Marilou that the money was to buy a home in her native country. Suspicious that Stephen was trying to break up with her, Marilou noticed that he was evasive whenever the pair had contact during her trip. There was only one voice call during that vacation, although Stephen did set up international text messaging, as he claimed calling was too expensive. Towards the end of September, Stephen contacted Marilou to ask her if she'd like to extend her stay, but she refused, saying she wanted to come home. Scheduled to fly home on October 4th, Marilou made the most of her time with her family, looking forward to being reunited with her lover and hoping perhaps that absence would have made his heart grow fonder. Stephen, though, had something altogether different and sinister on his mind. Mandalay Bay. On September 25, 2017, Stephen Paddock checked into the Mandalay Bay, asking for a high-level suite which looked directly onto the Route 91 Harvest Festival, a 3-day country music event which attracted thousands of music lovers. Upon check-in, he carried one bag to his room himself, followed by a bellman who delivered another 4 bags to Stephen's room. Once done, Stephen made the journey home to Mesquite, where he stayed overnight. The following day, Stephen returned to the Mandalay Bay after visiting a couple of casinos, this time rolling 1 suitcase himself, while another 6 were transferred to his room on a luggage cart. An 8-hour gambling session followed, bringing him well into the following day. Timelines differ among sources, but according to a police report, on September 27th, Stephen insisted on moving into adjoining rooms 32-134 and 32-135, but gave no explanation as to why he needed the second room. He was a valued guest, however, and the hotel was only too happy to accommodate him. Having ordered room service and remaining in situ while the rooms were cleaned, Stephen left the hotel with 2 suitcases at around 8:15 p.m. before arriving at a Mesquite Walmart at approximately 11 p.m., buying several items which included luggage, fake flowers, and razors. The following day, Stephen took care of some business, depositing $14,000 into a Wells Fargo account and wiring money to Marilou, before purchasing a .308 bolt-action rifle and taking it to the unofficial firing range which he had previously frequented with his girlfriend. Shortly after 10 p.m., Stephen was once again back at the Mandalay Bay, where he had arrived with 2 rolling suitcases and what appeared to be a laptop bag. A night of gambling followed, which lasted well into the early hours of the next morning. September 29th was a seemingly unremarkable day, during which he stayed in his rooms, apart from leaving briefly in the afternoon for sushi. On September 30th, though, Stephen traveled back to Mesquite not once but twice, leaving "Do Not Disturb" signs on the doors of both his rooms. He returned in the afternoon with 2 more suitcases. Neither room was cleaned on that day at Stephen Paddock's request. Stephen's behavior became more erratic on October 1st. Having moved his car from the garage to valet, which he booked in Marilou's name, Stephen returned once again to his room, where it was recorded that the locks on both rooms were engaged and disengaged multiple times. The deadbolt to room 32-134 was engaged for the last time at 9:46 p.m. Security. At around the same time as the deadbolt was engaged on Stephen's room, security officer Jesus Campos arrived on the 30th floor via the service elevator, then walked up 2 flights of stairs to the 32nd floor. Unable to open the door to that floor, the security officer took another flight of stairs, then used the guest elevator back down to the 32nd floor, where he discovered the reason he could not open the door. An L bracket had been screwed into the door and frame, preventing access. At 10:04 p.m., Jesus reported the strange finding to security dispatch, and just 1 minute later, 2 single gunshots rang out. Massacre. In the space of 1 minute, Stephen Paddock fired approximately 100 rounds into the 22,000-strong crowd below, who were enjoying the closing act. Hearing what he thought was the sound of electric drilling, security officer Campos headed towards rooms 32-134 and 32-135 to investigate. Stephen Paddock had set up several monitors in the hallway hidden on a food service cart, so when Jesus approached, Stephen saw him coming. Shot in the leg by one of around 35 bullets fired from inside, the security officer took cover in an alcove and radioed for help. By now, a maintenance worker by the name of Stephen Shook had arrived on the 32nd floor to investigate the mysterious L bracket, but before reaching the door, he was alerted to the gunfire by Jesus Campos, who informed hotel dispatchers that there was an active shooter in the hotel and to call the police. Over the course of just 10 minutes, Stephen Paddock had fired more than 1,000 rounds into the festival goers below, as well as attempting to ignite an aviation fuel tank at nearby McCarran International Airport, just 2,000 feet away. While some of his shots missed, he did manage to strike the tank twice. Kerosene, however, does not readily ignite by gunfire. If it had, the casualty number could have been far higher. The aftermath. Just over an hour after the shooting began, police officers used explosives to gain entry to the rooms. Stephen Paddock was lying on the floor of room 32-135, dead from a inflicted gunshot to the head. Not including himself, Stephen Paddock murdered 60 people. Initially, the number was set at 58, 31 of whom died at the scene, and a further 27 in hospital. However, a 57-year-old Californian woman who was paralyzed in the massacre died 2 years later, and her death was attributed to the shooting by a San Bernardino County medical examiner. In 2020, a 49-year-old woman from Nevada also died from complications from a leg wound inflicted during the attack. Police refused to include these two deaths in their reckoning, but in October 2020, exactly 3 years after the shooting, the deaths were added to the final toll. The people who lost their lives weren't the only victims, of course. More than 800 people were injured in the event, with 413 of those being hit with bullets or shrapnel, and another 450 or so injured in the panic and stampede to escape. Nobody really knows why the Las Vegas shooting happened. Stephen Paddock didn't leave a suicide note or a manifesto, and the people who knew him said he had never mentioned a desire to commit mass murder. Was it simply a case of a man who finally snapped? Theory 1. Notoriety. While Stephen's mother, Dolores, tried hard to shield her sons from what their father had done, Stephen did know that he was a bank robber, among other things. The FBI's official report claimed that he was a man who sought notoriety, just like his father. With declining mental and physical health and a dwindling fortune, did Stephen Paddock simply want to go out with a bang and become synonymous with the deadliest mass shooting in modern US history? Described by his brother as extremely detail-oriented, Stephen spent weeks researching hotels and venues in the area, as well as other music festivals with high expected attendance, which suggests that he chose Mandalay Bay because of its proximity to a large gathering of people, rather than a grievance against the hotel itself or the Route 61 festival. Alongside the searches for other hotels, Stephen had also mined for information on Las Vegas SWAT tactics, explosives and weapons, and the expected attendance at the festival. There were also hundreds of child pornography images stored on a computer that belonged to the shooter. When questioned about her son's crime, his mother suggested that he must have developed a brain tumor, but a microscopic study of his brain by scientists revealed no such abnormalities, while the autopsy failed to find anything that might explain his actions on that fateful day. Theory 2. ISIS. Contrary to the official findings, some people believe that Stephen Paddock worked for ISIS. Not just anyone, though. A retired CIA agent named Brad Johnson and a former National Security Council official by the name of Rich Higgins. According to these two men, there was substantial evidence that ISIS was involved. Despite the fact that Stephen appeared to have no links to any terrorist organization, domestic or otherwise, they believe that the attack was part of a coordinated anti-Trump plot involving the Islamic State and Antifa, or left-wing anti-fascist activists. If conspiracy theorist Alex Jones is to be believed, they found Antifa information in the room. The whole thing has the hallmarks of being scripted by deep state Democrats and their Islamic allies using mental patient cutouts. So convinced were the two men that they compiled a 51-page dossier filled with tactical counter-terrorism analysis, cyber intelligence, and digital data mining capabilities. Johnson and Higgins were so convinced by their beliefs that they sent the document to both the CIA and the FBI, along with the media and Congress. While the claims have never been taken seriously, they have had far-reaching effects, especially for one man named Brian Hodge. Named in the report as Stephen's accomplice, Hodge was said to have possible ties to Islamic organizations and possible Islamic State linkage. Brian was staying at the Mandalay Bay on the night of the shooting and allegedly had the room next to Stevens. The report, which was leaked anonymously online, contained personal details pertaining to Brian, leading to death threats and people turning up at his house to confront him. Furthermore, the Islamic State's news agency allegedly claimed responsibility for the attack. They said that Stephen had converted to Islam 6 months before the attack and went by the name Abu Abdul Bahr al-Amriki. While it was noted that ISIS never make false claims about their involvement in terrorist attacks, no proof was ever put forward and a theory was dropped, at least in official circles. Theory 3. Multiple shooters. While Brian Hodge denies any involvement in the massacre, he was responsible for the claim that there were multiple shooters and that Stephen didn't act alone. He said that he was returning to his room when the shooting began, so he fled outside and hid in some bushes, posting the events of the night as they happened on social media. At one point he posted, "There are multiple shooters with automatic weapons." Picked up by the media, his comments caused something of a frenzy, until his credibility was brought into question when he was found to make a number of inaccurate claims, including the proximity of his room to Stephen's. Brian's room was indeed on the same floor, but was definitely not next to that of the shooter. Nevertheless, Brian was implicated in the ISIS link, as according to Brad Johnson and Rich Higgins, he was the go-between ISIS and Antifa. With no concrete evidence to explain the link, the authors of the dossier made wild accusations, including, while not excessively political, it is clear from his Facebook activity that Mr. Hodge supports left-wing issues such as transgender rights, support of gay marriage, and that he holds some anti-right-wing views. Further proof came by way of claiming that Brian had eaten at a Turkish kebab restaurant in New Mexico following the attack, something Brian vehemently denies, as he says he's never even been to New Mexico. When attention fell on him as an ISIS collaborator, Brian changed the security settings on his social media accounts to ensure only a chosen audience could access his pages. This was apparently further proof of his guilt, as the purposeful deletion of data is evidence of consciousness of guilt. The accusations went on to say that since the Las Vegas attack, Mr. Hodge has attempted to conceal his electronic social media presence, locking down his Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook accounts. Theory 4. The Saudi Theory. Stories flooded the internet that the massacre was actually an attempt to assassinate Mohammed bin Salman, heir apparent to the Saudi throne. According to conspiracy theorists, the Saudi prince was staying at the Four Seasons Hotel, which is situated at the top of Mandalay Bay. This idea was cemented, theorists say, by the Saudi Arabian Purge, which happened a month after the shooting, in which many prominent princes and other dignitaries were arrested en masse after an anti-corruption committee was formed by the Crown Prince himself. Theory 5. False Flag. Conspiracy theories continue to spread, with many, including Alex Jones, claiming that the shooting was carried out with the full knowledge of the United States government, possibly to add strength to political objectives such as gun control. In part, this theory was plausible as, following the attack, there was an immediate ban on bump stocks. Bump stocks are designed to allow semi-automatic rifles to fire hundreds of bullets per minute and were fitted to some of the weapons Stephen Paddock used. Theory 6. Involvement of others. It goes without saying that Stephen meticulously planned the shooting, but many have questioned whether those close to him knew of his plans. Around 45 minutes before he took the first shot, a woman screamed, "You're all going to effing die." The woman was seen with an unknown male, and it has never been proved or disproved that she knew what was about to unfold. Something else that added to the theory that others knew of Stephen's intentions is the discovery of letters allegedly written to him from a friend and former prisoner Jim Nixon. Found by accident by the new occupants of an abandoned office building in Mesquite, these letters seem to suggest that Jim knew all about Stephen's intentions and tried to persuade the gunman to drop his plans. In a letter dated May 27, 2017, Jim wrote, "I can get someone for you who can help you. Please don't go out shooting or hurting people who did nothing to you. I am concerned about the way you are talking and believe you are going to do something very bad. Steve, Please, please don't do what I think you are going to do. The relationship began, according to Jim, approximately 6 or 7 years before the attack, and while the friendship was an easy one, Stephen became increasingly bitter at the system and would also mention death with alarming frequency. The letter went on, "I believe you are lying to me and you are going to hurt someone or kill someone. You sound like a real madman on the phone tonight." Despite the seriousness of the situation, Jim never took his information and suspicions to the authorities because he didn't believe his friend would carry out his threats. Theory 7. Avenging his father. Following the shooting, police discovered that Stephen had booked 2 rooms at the Blackstone Hotel, Chicago, during the 4-day Lollapalooza music festival, but cancelled the booking. Interestingly, Chicago is where Stephen had lost his father for the first time in 1953, following his arrest. Later, after the bank robberies, Benjamin had fled to Las Vegas, which is where he was subsequently found and arrested again in 1960. Was Stephen's heinous act of terrorism a way of avenging the father whom the authorities had taken from him, choosing one of the significant locations as a means of coming full circle? With so many theories flying around about the Las Vegas shooting, it's hard to know what to believe. Certainly, we will never truly know why Stephen Paddock massacred 60 people, injured hundreds more, and then turned the gun on himself. A doctor who treated Stephen described him as odd and said that he showed little emotion. Refusing to take antidepressants, Stephen did, however, accept anti-anxiety medication, but failed to take it regularly. Investigators suspect that he may have been bipolar, although that has never been substantiated. It seems safe to assume, though, that there were some mental health issues involved. It seems most likely that Stephen acted alone and wanted the same type of notoriety as his father before him. Disenchanted with life, sick by his own description, and possibly even bored, Stephen Paddock wanted to end his life and take as many people with him as he could. Witnesses to his life described depression, but how far back did it go? Did it happen in his later years as his personal life began to take a downturn, or was it something that had simmered and grown in magnitude as his life progressed through the decades? Stephen Paddock was a lot older than we might expect of a mass shooter. The average age of such a perpetrator is 33.4 years. It must have taken something very deep-rooted to trigger the event in a man who was rapidly approaching pension age. In fact, at 64, Stephen Paddock was only 3 years off retirement age. While he was in a relationship, by her own admission, his partner noticed that he had withdrawn both emotionally and physically. So it's safe to assume that he felt alone, perhaps even lonely, and seemingly unable, or more likely unwilling, to share his state of mind with those closest to him. He chose to end his own suffering in as heinous a way as possible, knowing that his name would live on long after his death. There were no children to carry on his family name, so was this his way of achieving infamy? It has been noted by doctors and researchers alike that in the run-up to a planned suicide, a person might feel total calm after the turmoil of the previous months and years, and perhaps the preparation that Stephen Paddock put into his own death, the stockpiling of weapons, the search for a location that could create the most damage, and sending his girlfriend to her home country, was the calm before the storm so often described in mental health texts. Given the location of the shooting and the fact that he had scoped out at least one other location that was pertinent to his father's story, it seems reasonable to conclude that Stephen carried a deep-seated resentment about the fact that he grew up without his father in his life. There was no conspiracy and no co-conspirators who helped him reach his goal. By committing a massacre of this magnitude, by himself, he and he alone would go down in history, albeit on a much bigger scale than his father ever achieved.